I fully support grandchildren.
Last night I got a link. My 15-year-old grandson sent me a link.
How did he send you the link?
With a text.
Okay.
And
I thought you said your 15-year-old emailed you, and I'm like, I don't believe you. Go ahead.
But he said, "Grandma, you're gonna love this." And he sent me the link to a band and the name of a song.
Yeah.
And I turned it on this morning, and it is just like, whoa, it's what we used to listen to when we were stoned. It's got Christian lyrics. It's like acid rock, but they're Christian lyrics. What do you, I mean, I was trying to listen for some redeeming quality when I could figure out the words.
Mm-hmm.
They were Christian lyrics. What is your response to, I mean, I can say, I love it that he talked about the Alpha and the Omega and the whispering voice,
Mm-hmm.
But is there a redeeming quality to acid rock Christian music?
I just love that you're using the description of acid rock for the music, and you're asking a very real question. Here's the thing that I think is the 15-year-old grandson he's not trying to provoke you. That was a sincere message that he sent you, wasn't it?
He loves me profusely.
Yeah, and he's connecting with his grandma. Was that Sunday morning?
No, it was Saturday night.
Saturday night, he sent you something that he sincerely wanted you to know he likes, and thought you would like it too. We will face, I told my wife when we started having kids, I thought we exposed them to, it's when All That You Can't Leave Behind came out, the U2 album, when our first son was born, and she would listen to that album whenever she would feed him. I was like, you're going to ingrain U2 into his DNA. It's like that. I was like, that's good. That's as long as all he listens to is U2. I said, we feel young and hip right now, but there's probably a time when our kids are going to be listening to something that sounds like, fingernails on a chalkboard. I'm like, what is that? So you kind of have to separate a lot of issues. The first thing that's so positive is that your 15-year-old is reaching out to you in a positive way, saying that, this is something you may like. It may not be something you may like, but I wouldn't immediately jump to it being a moral issue as far as, the way that goes. I have a hard time listening to different kinds of rap because of my own personal history and exposure to rap as a kid. And some of the stuff that was going on in the late 80s, early 90s with the rap movement and the obscenity and the big battles that were going on with labeling albums when I was growing up. And I think that's the similar argument that Paul has with the meat sacrifice to idols and trying to help people, weaker brothers, stronger brothers. When we come to Christ, we come out of a background that we have a background that's tied so much to our pagan experience and things that had defiled us at one point that it makes us hard. But your grandson has no history with that style of music. I don't know what the song is, but if it is a Christian band or has some type of a redemptive lyric to it, then it's like, well, that's great, honey. That's all I would reply. I'm glad you like that. I just wouldn't, keep the relationship up, and I just wouldn't worry about some of the little things like that. That's fantastic that you have a 15-year-old grandson that bothers to communicate with you and thinks you'll like that, because it also shows that you have impressed on him what you value. But I don't think you have to listen to it on repeat.
I listened to about 2 minutes of it, and it's like, okay, Alpha and Omega. I can comment on that.
There you go. Well, you could also figure out what the title is and look up the lyrics. You can find the lyrics to any song. You could just read them. I did that with the latest Kanye West album. I don't know if you're following Kanye's, what appears to be a legitimate conversion to Christianity. Because I've asked a couple people, have you listened to Kanye's new album? And they just laugh at me, because generally that's how people respond to anything I say. They're like, oh, I'm serious. And someone said, you mean that Joker? It was an older person. So, well, I think that Joker may have come to Christ. I'm not, 100% positive, but I listened to the album. And I was like, boy, this seems pretty impressive what God may be doing in this man's life. And then there's the celebrity status of it all, trying to come to Christ and be discipled and walk with everybody watching you around the world. So I don't know, I've never had that experience. So
Praise God we don't have to deal with that.
yeah. Tough question. Any other easy ones like that? Anything about Brad? Yeah.
Do you have any, I'm trying to think, wisdom when it comes to like specific apps or the whole cyberbullying as you moved into, now kids have cell phones, and it just seems like there's a lot of things out there that kids are, well, I mean, you're monitoring the apps that are going on your phone, but what wisdom would you have regarding that?
It's like the best relationships are the ones where your kids know that they can talk to you about stuff, regardless of technology, and so that they can tell you that something's wrong or that something happened, or so if you sow that at an early age, and they know it's a safe place to ask questions. Like in the realm of sexuality, I had such a hard time with that. Like I got a really awkward talk in a book that was designed to educate me on what, your body is changing kind of a thing. And I never talked to my parents again. They didn't want to talk. It was kind of this weird. And so I knew I didn't want that with my kids. And so I'd read this idea. I love the idea of starting an open relationship and a conversation so that they know they can ask you anything about body parts or changes or how does that work or where do babies come from. And I was fine with it until he was probably in second grade. They were learning about DNA, and he said, my son said, I know how I have mom's DNA and I have your DNA. I was in mom, so I know how I got her DNA, but and he said it this way to me, he goes, how did your DNA get into mom? And I sprayed my coffee, and I wasn't ready to have that conversation. But I was, afterwards I was like, well, he's trying to figure out the world, and he came to me to figure it out. So if you can keep that relationship going, then it makes these things pretty open, whether it's an app or whatever. And but the bullying, they're connecting with their friends and their peers, and so the bigger question is, who are they hanging out with that is treating them that way? The nice thing about I graduated high school in '93. The nice thing was people had to be mean to you to your face. Like they couldn't. It was just pretty straightforward. People were rude and bullied you or knocked your books on the ground, but it was physical and it was confrontational, and you understood how it worked, and there wasn't anything going on behind the scenes that some horrible stuff was taking place. So I think that's the bigger thing, is just staying connected so that the connections that they have in the digital world, you understand who they are and who they're hanging out with. That's what I mean. There's always going to be sneakers, people that come in and do terrible things. When I first started, we had a couple people start doing, Facebook was big with the kids. That's how long ago I started. Facebook was big with kids. And people would make fake accounts for other kids and put horrible pictures on there and say horrible things. And so it was this anonymous thing that everyone would see. And there were two situations of that. It was the worst case I'd seen of bullying, because you don't know who it is, you don't know where it came from, but someone knows you enough to say horrible things about you and post it online. And then it's very hard if you've tried to work with any of these social media companies. It's very hard to prove that that's not you and to get something taken down. It takes a while, but I think that's the biggest thing, is just staying connected with the kids so that it's a conversation that they can ask you or tell you that there's a problem, and to stay connected that way. Because I think the technology isolates, and I think that's its biggest problem. And so that's where the youth culture has always been, well, not always, but I'd say since the 50s, with the whole concept of youth culture, it's a subset of the adult culture. And so it has its own kind of language, its own kind of world. And I think technology has just made that so much more connected and so much more underground, away from parents. That's where the new app comes from. Get off Facebook, mom's on Facebook, we'll go to Instagram. Now mom's on Instagram, we got to go to Snapchat, that way that'll go away. And Instagram will allow the same thing with Instagram stories, and so they keep moving. But that's when youth are in a separate culture and kind of raising themselves and each other, that's where we really get a problem culturally. And obviously you'll have a problem as a family when your kid's being raised by their peers and not you. Does that help? One thing I didn't mention, there's a lot of good companies that are working very hard to help you monitor and filter devices. One of them is Bark. You may have heard of Bark because theirs goes into the social media apps, and so helps you monitor. It'll even monitor language that's coming in through private messages on the phone. You may have seen them because they do sting operations with sexual predators. And there's an article going around. They had one of their staff set up a fake Instagram account as an 11-year-old girl. She left it wide open. Anyone can message this person. Anyone can see what she posts. And she just posted something about hanging out with friends and going to a party or something, and had a picture of a girl, very innocent. And if you read the article, it'll turn your stomach to see what messages start coming in within a 24-hour window, the connections that were being made. And then it set up several sting operations with police. But the very real reality of not allowing your children to have something that's open for everyone to see is the big deal. And that's what I mean about understanding what they're doing and what they set up. My daughter came in, they started playing a game on devices called Dragon Veil, which was kind of, I don't know, anyone familiar with that one? It was years ago. You're dragons and it's kind of a kid's game. And what I didn't realize is that people who were playing online could message the kids. I didn't think it was online. And so my daughter came in, she was 11, and she was like visibly shaken. She goes, "Someone wants to be my boyfriend, or they wants me to be their girlfriend." And she had this message from someone that said that they were playing with, and he said, "Would you be my girlfriend?" And there was nothing graphic or weird, but it just shook her that this person would message her, because she took it personal, even though it was just in this game. And that's why I was like, oh man, what am I doing here? Like, let me see this game. So I started Googling Dragon Veil, and there's parental controls. You could easily turn it off, and I made sure they were connected to these 4 friends that they wanted to play it with. But that was my first eye-opener to like, boy, this stuff isn't something you mess around with. Oh, Bark Custodio with a Q is another good one. We use Covenant Eyes, still that one. That one I like. Our 13-year-old son, it's on his phone because it loads its own web browser. So if he wants to go online, he has to go through their browser, and so it fully filters and controls and messages me information about what he's doing online. It won't help you with the apps, and that's where you've got to be. It's just hard work.
Is there any help for YouTube?
YouTube. What I have done, I set up, my son uses my YouTube account. It looks like he's me. And so I see a full history, and it's just showing me everything he's watching. Yeah. Well, and we don't allow any technology to be used alone. You have to be out in public spaces and in the home. The problem with him, he now has data, so he could be anywhere and using it. So there's a maturity and a trust factor, and that he got his phone younger than the other ones, and that's what I told him. I said he's proven himself more ready to actually deal with this than you guys did at his age, and they knew that. The older two were like, that's true. But so we do things like that with the home. We have a charging station. No devices go to your rooms, especially at night. They go below our TV. You plug in and they go in there just to alleviate that privacy. No, I knock on bathroom doors in our house and be like, "Do you have your phone? Do you have it's just in my pocket." No, I want it right now. Right now? I want it right now. I'll wait until you're done. I'll wait here, and I'll just because there's no phones in the bathrooms. You just set these family rules that just lets them know that there are temptations that we just don't want to even deal with, and there's some things you can set in place with family rules, and then if they go other places, you have to work through all that.
Good job.
Well, it's learning the hard way and reading scary articles. Did that help? The YouTube thing is not, none of it's easy. I think there's probably some YouTube, there's a kids tube thing. I just don't trust anything that's going to tell you that will filter what only your kids need. Like Disney Circle, we use that. Does anyone use Disney Circle? It's a little box that it'll actually give, you can set up a user, tell them this is a 6-year-old kid, and gives them a portal that only allows content for a 6-year-old kid. Well, it's Disney Circle, so you can imagine what the content is. It was fine. The filtering works. It's very, 6-year-old appropriate, but it is largely Disney. And so it lets that in. But that one lets you set up a timer. You can have their device will shut off after a certain amount of time. You can only watch videos that allow through their portals. We use Disney Circle with a lot of success because of the built-in timer. And I know Netgear's Orbi mesh wireless system, which is a very nice home network, has Disney Circle built into the router. And so you don't have to buy a separate device in order to deal with that.
Is that a monthly subscription type plan?
No, the Disney Circle, you just buy the device and you're done. Like Covenant Eyes, I pay $15 a month. I think we can have like 10 users, multiple devices. It could be on PC or phone, but that's why the Disney Circle, if you don't have data, if it's young kids and they're just using it in the home, the Disney Circle is fantastic for controlling what's going on in your house. And like I said, if you're a techie guy and you wanted an excuse to upgrade your home network, you just got one. You're like, honey, we gotta get the Orbi. You heard the man. So, because that's the other thing dads deal with. I don't know what kids used to complain about, but like, Dad, our internet's terrible. So it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry we can't provide faster internet for you. But it's usually a Wi-Fi problem in our house. And so that fixed a lot of our complaints and a lot of my complaints.
I think it's so important to not allow the enemy to make you fearful that your children are going to dislike you. They will dislike you. But it's not of the enemy that they dislike you. They're not getting what they want. But so much of the time we allow the enemy to make us want to be our children's best friend.
Yeah, and I don't think they dislike you. They just don't like to be inconvenienced sometimes with things like finishing their meal or, all the things we do as parents. But I think they understand that you're there to love them and protect them. And I think ultimately as they grow, they appreciate that. If you're consistent with it and and we follow through.
Going back to your message yesterday about being reasonable, have you learned experiences where maybe in your best efforts with good intent with your kids and technology, moments where you've been unreasonable, like a blind spot as a dad or
I never lose it. Any other questions? Is this being recorded? I lose it. I get so frustrated. Well, like something like that with why? I've told you not to bring that in the bathroom. I've told you not to use that in your room. Like why? Why is that? I'm just so frustrated with disobedience. I think that's the biggest problem. And then I have to stop and ask myself, why do I feel so frustrated or so unreasonable or a very strong lack of gentleness? It's because they have tread on my rules. Not because they have breached God's rules or are doing something, but you have inconvenienced me, and therefore I am frustrated with you. And so it always goes back to my heart as far as that, being unreasonable. And the other thing is I haven't clearly articulated what the rules are. My wife often points this out. He said, you're getting frustrated, but I don't think you've been very clear on exactly what your expectations are. Because, my daughter is using a laptop in her bedroom. Door's open, she's at her table where you can see the screen. She's working on paper, it's pretty obvious. I'm like, what are you doing? That's how I start the conversation. It's a great way to begin. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Or like, hey, what are you working on? My wife had approved, you can work up there, that's fine. And I start the tech tirade. And a lot of it's just fear-based. And I'm just responding to a fear that you've got. I knew it, you've gone off the deep end. You're typing Google Docs in your bedroom, and now it's terrible. So, I mean, that's for me, for parenting. That's always been the issue as far as the gentleness and reasonableness, and just stopping long enough to think through, why am I wanting to react this way? And is this for their good or for my good? That was always my issue, especially early on. Am I disciplining my kids for my sake or for their sake? Am I asking them to act this way for my sake, like so they look good in front of other people, or am I trying to make them a better human? And sometimes it's going to be messy, and everyone just needs to know that. That's hard.
What about, as they graduate from high school, but maybe they're staying at home during college years, like how do you engage them? Like clearly if they're not a kid anymore, they might, they can legally own their own devices. And, like how do you recommend transitioning to that part of life?
Yeah, I have a 19-year-old that lives with us,
Okay.
so he's his own man, literally. Buys his own stuff, uses his own stuff. He has the option to have Covenant Eyes loaded on his devices. I make recommendations to him as someone who lives with him and knows him pretty well, and I'll sit down and talk to him about, and he's still required to follow. There's house rules that people who live with us are just going to follow. The charging station. I don't want stuff in his room at night. That's just what we do as a family. If you live here, but on your own. But there's definitely giving kids more freedom as they grow. Because what I didn't want to do is them to get to 18 and then try and figure out what a smartphone is and how to use one. And I don't want them figuring out the world after they leave my house. I want to help them figure out the world while they're here, so that when they go out, there's no surprises, it's consistent. And so encouraging them to get jobs and play sports that get them involved with, kids who aren't from the church, and start to see that so that we can have conversations at an early age. I mean, that starts early on. If your kids have ever seen another kid throwing a fit. I remember our 4-year-old saw a kid just throwing a tantrum in the store because they kept screaming, but I want it! And I saw them looking at them, and I could see that they're like, well, I didn't know that was an option. And I could see him watching to see, I wonder if this works. So I was like, it starts a conversation they're being naughty, aren't they? Yeah, they are being naughty. That's why I was watching. And so that's how we work it, as far as but we also start charging. Well, here's your cut of you're on our cell phone plan. But here's your percentage that you need to start paying, and then insurance for cars, and because you're an adult. And but we let our kids. I don't know how it used to work, but I told you're welcome to live here as long as you're moving forward. Because if you're moving forward, you're not going to want to live here very long. But that doesn't mean going to college anymore. Gen Z, it was 85% of millennials thought you had to have a 4-year degree. This is millennials, a 4-year degree to move on in life. It's 20% of Gen Z think you have to have a 4-year degree in order to have a career. Google, Apple, and IBM all dropped from every job the requirement of a 4-year degree. They just stopped. They used to have it. You have to have these technical training areas and a 4-year undergrad. And what they realized was what they were getting, a student who had a 4-year undergrad didn't really mean anything as far as what they needed as a human and as a worker, because it really wasn't giving them benefits. But that's a good question. Yep.
So there's all kinds of scary stuff, right? In your work, are you seeing remarkable works done by youth who aren't constrained by, I'm going to work a 40-hour week, and I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I turn 18, I'm going to go in the military, they don't have these constructs in their environment anymore. Is there a positive thing that's coming from this? And children who have been taught how to avoid the worst of what is out there and use it for what it is?
I think I'm seeing it in my 19-year-old, but I think I'm so old I'm having a hard time with it. Because I'd like to tell people, because people ask me, is he in college? That's the first question. Or does he go to school? Or is he, well, he's not in college. And so I immediately feel like when I went for 2 years at George Fox and then I dropped out. Because in 95 you had to drop out. If you went full-time school, you dropped out. And I remember my dad if you quit, you're not going to go back. It's I'll go back. I just don't have the money right now. I'm gonna get a job. I'll finish my degree. And so now, the great part, as of like 10 to 15 years ago, you didn't drop out. You could just take they call them gap years or gap decades or whatever. Take the time to figure it out. Because they realize the worst thing to do is go to college to try and figure out what you want to do. College is a business. What they want you to do is to keep going to college. And it's like, now that, 5 years and 6 years is pretty normal, because you go for 2, you figure out what you want to do, and they're like, well, you're going to need to take these classes. It's going to require a 5th or 5.5 or summer. And so, but my son, he's always had an interest in music and realized he has good disciplers with him. I've thanked men in our church multiple times because of, I think it's a lot of what they have done, because they're not his dad and they're giving him very similar advice. And they're like, maybe musician isn't your thing. I can't tell him that. I'm not even a musician, but he got into audio engineering. And he loves audio engineering. There's schools you can go to for audio engineering. I don't know if it's the best move for it. I had to ask people that are close to him who have experience in this, is this something he could do? And they said he's very gifted in it. And so he's pursuing it. He's volunteering in churches, and he's driving to camps and helping run their sound. And so he's when you have the internet at your disposal to figure out what you want to do, what you're interested in, how you can use it, you can start to build a path if you're driven. And he's always been driven and an explorer. And I think that's where Gen Z is going to do some pretty amazing things, because they don't see a limit or a roof or a traditional path that they're stuck in. Does that mean my time is up and they cut my mic?
We just turned the mic off.
Yeah.